Let's talk about composition and how to divide your space when drawing. What's up friends, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another video. What I want to do today is discuss space division and how to work on a composition of a drawing. Okay, so basically you have this empty rectangular called your paper, and you really want to just create an interesting scene or an interesting design of a painting or a drawing or whatever it is. And many times you look at the scene and there's so many aspects to it, like of how to translate that into the paper. So first of all, you can't put in all of that information. It's really difficult to just squeeze everything in, and it's inefficient because our eye can't focus on everything at the same time anyway. So you have a whole simplification aspect. But aside from that, you also have the composition aspect of where do I actually place everything. And so this is what I want to focus on today. So what we're going to do is just create a very simple scene, and I'll show you how to divide it in an interesting way. And if some of you remember, I reviewed this book by Jack Ham, Drawing Scenery, Landscapes and Seascapes. Really good book, excellent actually, on just composition and drawing scenes. So I'm just going to take one exercise, one demo from the book, and really show it for you and tell you how I divide the space and how I think about the division of the space, just to create something interesting. And you will see how with just a series of lines, vertical, horizontal, diagonal, you can create a very interesting scene and then just put stuff on it and just make a really interesting composition. Okay, so let's get started with drawing. So let me start with a really nifty trick. I talked about it before, but what Jack recommends in his book also is to create this cardboard square, and then you can just quickly create a frame or a framework for you to draw inside. So what I'm gonna do now is just create that frame with just a normal medium pencil, something like HB pencil, number 2 pencil. Now the reason I mentioned the pencil is, here we go, we have a clear frame. Now the reason I mention the pencil is because for the actual sketch we're going to use this 6B pencil, which are more recommended when doing this kind of work, okay? So basically we can just start working on the shape division here. Space division, sorry. And what I'm looking for is just to avoid the middles as much as possible in the beginning, okay? So what we're gonna do is just create a set of lines that will later on guide us, okay? So we can start with, and I'm really going by the way he did it because I just wanna make sure the result's interesting, okay? So if you have the book, you'll actually see a very similar result. So let's just start with one line here. Just create, one line like this, and perhaps another one next to it. And so we have this just 2 lines, and we put them on the side around a third to the right, like the rule of thirds in photography. Same thing here. Now we want to add another line, and so what we want to have in mind is just how can we break the pattern that we created here and create something interesting. So first off, let's not create a vertical line, let's go for a horizontal this time. And instead of doing a straight line, let's go with a diagonal line. So we have a few options, we can put it here, 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 but if we do want this to be a landscape, let's suggest a line here somewhere around the ground and do it like a little diagonal, okay? So now we have a diagonal line here, and the interest comes from the fact that we are just breaking the patterns. We keep breaking them. We're adding stuff that don't conform to any type of really organized shape, okay? So this can be sort of a ground for the landscape or anything else. And also another interesting thing that happens here is that these 2 lines obscure this line. So this creates a sense of depth, okay? This is something that's in the front. So I just rearranged the camera a bit. Now next we want to put maybe another line that's vertical. So again, avoiding the centers. Now, the thing is that you want to take into consideration, this is the center of the page, but now we also created a space here. We also want to avoid the center of that. So what we're going to do is we won't go here, somewhere in the center of this area. We'll take it a little to the left. Okay, so maybe somewhere around here. Just drop that line like this and drop another one. Now, again, we're trying to break the pattern. So let's not make the distance between these two the same as here. Let's make it smaller, okay? And maybe some of you can guess where this is going. Maybe some of you have the book and you actually know where this is going, or you've seen this exercise before. But it's really cool. You just start by dividing the shapes, and already you have an interesting abstract composition. The thing that's really cool with this is that if you're into abstracts, you can just immediately apply it to your abstract work. Okay, I'm not doing abstract work, but I can totally see this working as leading the viewer's eye in that sense, okay? Because the only difference between abstract and non-abstract is that later on you will add some more realistic elements to make these shapes something, okay? Next up, let's add another line, maybe this time again horizontal. And to break this shape, perhaps we can create another line that's a bit diagonal. But we want to, again, avoid any middles, so the middle between here and here. It's here. Let's go a little downwards. And another cool thing to pay attention to, it's like if you really want to get into it, so make sure that you don't start it in the same distance like this one. Okay, because that will also lead to perhaps a possibility for a boring composition. So let's take the same distance, which is about here, I'd say, just from instinct, and add a bit more, so start it around here. Okay, and I'm just going to create another diagonal line. It can end somewhere here. Sometimes it helps when running lines to actually mark the two spots you want to connect. So this is what I'm going to do. By the way, a lot of you know that it's easier for me to talk while painting rather than drawing, so apologies in advance if I'm rambling or if I'm losing my track of thought, because I don't know, something about this action of really diving deep into the drawing aspect, so it can sometimes confuse me so much. So anyway, let's now add another of this pattern, but let's make it significantly smaller, so 2 additional lines, and you can see how every time we layer them, we just go behind the horizontal layer we created. So we have this one at the front, this element a little bit at the back. This element is more at the back, which is suggested by the fact that it's obscured by this element. And this one's also at the back. Now let's create another one that's coming out from this one. So if we really want to break things here, let's do it here, okay? And I'm literally just narrating the thought process, okay? You have so many means to use. You can use vertical, horizontal, diagonal, distances, shapes, darknesses, as we will soon see, if you darken something a little more, a little less, if you blacken it completely. So very cool tools that you have at your disposal just to create an interesting composition, okay? Now let's add another sort of diagonal line, and as some of you figured out, some of you have the book, this is actually a forest landscape, so what we have here is actually trees, okay? But I did want to start abstract in my explanation, just so that you can see the logic behind it and not think in terms of a tree ground. Okay, so surprise, it's actually a forest landscape, but you see how the principles work. Now, the more we go into the distance, the smaller things become. So if we have this large chunk of ground, we have this one, which is a bit smaller, okay, because this one has a larger area. So let's create another one that's significantly smaller. And this will create the cool effect that we're actually moving into the distance. So let's go extreme and start here and maybe end it around here. And I'm just going to connect these two lines. And while connecting dots, I know some people may have problems with this as well. It's relatively basic, but if you don't have your hand-eye coordination down, or you're just starting out in drawing, so this can be a challenge. What you want to do is sort of draw the line First off, you can ghost above it. So if you ghost like this, you just imagine the motion and then you actually draw the line, which is a very, very, very efficient way of going about inking. Okay, because inking, you just lay down the line and that's it, it's doomed. So you can do this, you can ghost above it and just get a feel for the movement, for the direction, and then you just go ahead and you start drawing it while being completely aware of where you're trying to reach. Okay, it's a bit of a practice. You can just do an exercise where you draw 2 dots and connect them. Do this like 50 times a day and you'll slowly get the hang of it, okay? So anyway, let's add one more tree in the background, because now we know these are trees. Now this one's going to be significantly smaller, so I'm just going to pull up a line like this, and again avoiding the centers, so I go here and another thin line like that, and there we have it. We can just add now what will end up being the horizon line, okay? Or we can even take this further, one more layer, which could be interesting as well. So let's add this additional line. Now, just to make it interesting, let's have it a bit the opposite way. So something like from here, it took me a moment, just to avoid the, again, even spaces, and all the way down to here. Okay, I'm just gonna draw it, ghosting a bit, drawing a bit, changing it a bit as I go along. This is really just practice. You know, when you're practicing, don't worry too much. I mean, you want to be hyper-focused. Sorry, the paper moved. You want to be hyper-focused, but you also want to be not worried about the result. Okay, so it's like a bit of a paradox, could be, but it's not really. You're very devoted to the work you do, but you're also trying to let go of any outcome. Okay, your outcome is basically to just perform the exercise. So let's add one final tree here in the background, really tiny, not in the center. Again, let's move a bit to the right or to the left, it doesn't really matter, and just add this teeny tiny tree. Now we have now the composition, and I want you to really notice how your eye kind of travels. So you have this major shape here, and also this area is a bit crowded, so your eye is sort of attracted to here. There's just many shapes, many things going on here. And probably what happens, for me at least, when I analyze the direction of movement, I go here first. I stop for a bit around this area, then I move on to this one, because my eyes perceive that this one is further away, or it's just the next meaningful area. It sort of travels inwards, okay? And this is exactly the effect we want. Now we can take this in many different ways. We can just start adding textures, making it look actually like trees. We can keep it relatively abstract, okay? So I think what we can do now is, let's take it one step further and actually turn this into trees and a scene, just so you can see the finalized process. But even in the book, he talks about many ways to finalize this. So you can just start painting the different layers or coloring them, darkening them in different ways. There's a lot of things you can do here. But let's try to just make this look a little like a tree landscape. I'm gonna do that in time-lapse because this video is a bit fast and it's not about the details, it's just about the thought process, okay? So I'm gonna get all the shapes of the trees in time-lapse, and then we can continue on to finalizing it. Alrighty, so we are basically done with all the major details of the branches. Now just one word about the size of this. So as you can see, it's a really small sized landscape. If you just compare it to my finger, it's about the same. Let's go from this direction, about the same length. Now there are a few benefits and advantages to working in this small of a size, and I talked about them a bit on my review of the book itself, but I'll give you just two. So first is you can finish this type of a scene rather quickly, and let's give you three even. First, you can really finish this quickly and just gain a lot of experience. You don't have to work for hours on a large scene. Second, it's easier to see the composition when it's in a small frame rather than a really large piece of drawing. And the larger it is, the harder it is to actually see the different elements together, unless you take a distance away from it, like you move backwards. And the third is, which I just thought about now, is, okay, so when you work with pencil, it's so easy to smear it off with your hand. And here you don't have that risk, because I can do anything from around the frame. I don't even need to touch the paper, at least not on this point, okay? So just one last advantage to working that way. So anyway, now we can just again finalize these trees. You can add a few different sort of groups of leaves and things like this. This I'm losing my voice sometimes does weird things. So anyway, you can just add a bunch of leaves here, a bunch of things here and there, sort of cover up the bare trees. And really also the thing with the composition is in action also when working on the branches. So you see I tried going for just an interesting structure to make sure that it still looks interesting with the branches. It doesn't, like, not all branches move left, they don't conform to some rule, they just each goes in a different direction, okay? One thing to take into consideration is the closer the tree is, or whatever object it is, the more details of it we can see. So what I'm gonna do is really darken up the trees in the background, and you will really see how this makes them all pop. So I think, again, I will finalize this in time-lapse and just come back and talk a bit about the process, and we can wrap up this video. So this is done. I know I did a lot of things here. Just got in most of the shadows, the darks, the lights, and notice how, again, all of the principles of composition take place here as well, because there's really a lot of thought process that I didn't do, but Jack Ham did, because I'm basing this on his scene. But for example, here's an interesting thing that happens here. So you have this branch of the tree that's really dark, okay, and this section, top section of the tree, that's also quite dark. And then at the back you have a negative of that. You have the branches are white, and the background, the foliage, the leaves are dark. So just to create that interesting contrast, you have these two trees here that are really dark, and then you have this tree that's light, and just break this pattern. The layers on the ground also have different levels of darkness. You have this one starting relatively dark, but then bam, it darkens a little more. Here it lightens up, here it gets really dark, and in the very foreground you have these more well-defined shapes. Of course, you can go at it in many different ways. You can just fill it in with different textures without even treating this as trees or as realistic objects. You can shade them, you can do so many things, but the basic part stays the same, the part of the composition. And once you get that, like how to divide the space efficiently, you can literally divide it in an abstract way, and then just decide on that division to become the basis for where you place all of your tiny little points of interest and extra details and things of that nature. So I hope you enjoyed it. Let's change the angle and wrap up this video. So this is it, friends. I hope you enjoyed this little exercise in composition. What I love about this, and you will hopefully find you have the same experience, is when I actually do this many times and just focus on it for a while, and then I go out and draw a scene, or even if I base a scene on a photo and I just go and try approaching painting it or drawing it, automatically my mind makes the connection. It's like, okay, this tree that over there doesn't look so good, let's move it a bit to the left, let's move it a bit to the right. And that way you can use your reference images, just like I showed you in the watercolor simple sunset landscape video. I'll put a link maybe here. or here, I don't know. Just like I showed you there, it's really, you are not committed to the landscape or to the view or to the scene exactly as you see it. You can literally do whatever you want, change things around, you know, it's your world, like Bob Ross used to say, it's your little world, you do whatever you want with it. So you can actually base all the realistic elements on what you see, but composition-wise, where you place those realistic elements, totally up to you. And then you make little modifications to make it look cool. So this is it. This is a really good exercise. I hope you find it helpful, and you can do it also, just divide spaces and stuff like that. So this is it. Don't forget to follow me on Snapchat and Instagram, and also here on YouTube, and I will see you again really soon.